In this lecture, we will revisit the concept of security with our use case in mind. Here we'll have two different Lambda functions, one that will read from the DynamoDB database. The first Lambda will create the orders in the DynamoDB database. So these two Lambda functions should have the appropriate permissions or the policies to do those operations against the DynamoDB component. Those will go into the execution role or the IAM role that gets created when we create these Lambda functions. Earlier it was just the CloudWatch permissions, but now we'll have permissions for our Lambda functions to go against the DynamoDB or use the DynamoDB table. On the other hand, you are going to see resource policy this time because we'll have an API gateway component that will be triggering the Lambda functions. So there should be a resource policy defined which will allow that to happen. Once you finish this project, this is how your Lambda functions will look like once you go to the console. Let me go to the create order function. You will have two different functions by the end of this section. Let me go to create order function. Go to the permissions. Here is the execution role that will be created. Click on that. That will take you to the IAM service where you can have a look at the policies. We have, along with the default policy, we will have another policy this time, which is create order function role policy. This is configured in the template.aml. In the next few lectures, you are going to do this. See this? Using a policy element, you will configure what permissions your Lambda function requires to get its job done. Here is the create order function. Here is the policies element. Within that, there are predefined policies that allow us to do several things. Here we are saying DynamoDB CRUD policy. So this Lambda function can perform create, read, update and delete operations against which table? The orders table. You will be learning more about that syntax in the template.aml lecture. Just to give you the basics. So that is where this policy came from. Expand it to see the JSON and you can see all the permissions. The actions are DynamoDB get, delete, put. All those operations can be performed against which table? We always restrict the Lambdas to very specific permissions. Here, this is the table or the resource against which our Lambda function will have these permissions. We are allowing. Effect is allow. So with a few lines of configuration, we will achieve all this. We don't have to go to the console and configure all these policies. So this is the one side of the story where our Lambda gets what permissions it requires to get its job done. The other side of the story is the resource policy. If you remember security, we have to go check the resource policy. Let me show you the resource policy. If I go back to the Lambda function, scroll down. Earlier, when we created the hello world function, there was no resource policy because there was no trigger configured to invoke our Lambda. But here, by the end of this section, you will see that a resource policy is automatically created. You don't have to do any additional work. Thanks to SAM, we just configure that the trigger for our Lambda function is API gateway. That is all we do. SAM will take care of creating this security permission for us. And here you see which service wants to trigger the Lambda function. It is the API gateway dot, let me zoom it a little, API gateway dot Amazon AWS.com. What is the action? Lambda dot invoke function. Which Lambda function? This is the Lambda function. And where is it? Right here in this region. We can add more filters using which operation? Post operation. When the API gateway is hit using the post operation, only then it will have permissions to invoke this Lambda function. That is how the resource policies work. So in the next few lectures, you will not only see the execution policies getting created for the Lambdas to use DynamoDB, but also the resource policies, which will give the permissions to the triggers or to the components that trigger the Lambda functions. For the resource policies themselves, as I said, we don't have to do any additional work. SAM will take care of it for us as soon as we configure a component as a trigger to our Lambda functions. For the execution policies, this is the section that is responsible for adding those permissions to the IAM role.